The old woman's warning echoed in my mind as I drove through the winding mountain roads toward Brasov. Don't go to that house, Dom. Some places, they remember the evil that was done there. But I had already signed the lease, already transferred the money. A 6-month writing retreat in a 300-year-old manor house seemed like the perfect opportunity to finish my novel. The furniture was old but solid, and the massive stone fireplace dominated the main room. I spent the first day settling in, arranging my laptop and notes in what had once been the library. The GPS signal died 20 minutes before I reached the property. The forest pressed in on both sides of the narrow road, ancient spruce trees, blocking out most of the autumn sunlight. The red tile roof was missing patches, and ivy crawled up the walls like grasping fingers. Moonlight filtered through a single round window, casting strange shadows across the cluttered space. Old furniture, trunks, and paintings covered in sheets filled the room, but what drew my attention was the desk in the center of the space, and the figure sitting behind it. The floorboards groaned beneath my feet, but she remained motionless. When I was close enough to touch her, I reached out with a trembling hand, but the key was where the owner had promised, under the third loose stone by the front door. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was a person, a woman in a white dress, her back turned to me, sitting perfectly still. Her long black hair hung down past her shoulders, and her hands were folded in her lap. Look, I should have told you about the history of the house. When I finally saw the iron gates, my heart sank. I fled downstairs and didn't sleep for the rest of the night. The photos online hadn't captured the decay rust ate through the metalwork like cancer, and the stone pillars were cracked and stained with decades of weather. The house itself stood 3 stories tall, its Gothic windows staring down at me like hollow eyes. The interior was better than I'd feared. Someone had clearly made efforts to modernize it: electricity, plumbing, even internet, though the connection was spotty. This time I was ready. I grabbed a flashlight and crept upstairs, following the sound. It led me to a door at the end of the hall, a door that hadn't been there the day before. That first night, I heard the footsteps. The footsteps had stopped, but I could feel something watching me from the darkness above. I climbed slowly, the wooden steps creaking under my weight. They came from upstairs, slow, deliberate pacing across the floorboards. I assumed it was just the old house settling, but the sound was too rhythmic, too purposeful. I climbed the stairs to investigate, but found only empty rooms filled with dust and shadows. The second night, the footsteps returned. My hands shook as I turned the handle. The door opened onto a narrow staircase leading up to what must have been the attic. The attic was larger than I'd expected, stretching across the entire width of the house. At first, I thought it was just another sheet-covered piece of furniture. "Hello?" I whispered. She didn't respond. I took a step closer, and then another. My fingers passed through empty air. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering. The chair was empty. There was no woman, no white dress, just shadows and moonlight playing tricks on my mind. The next morning I called the owner. "Is there something you didn't tell me about this house?" I asked. There was a long pause. "What have you seen?" "A woman in the attic. She was sitting at a desk, but when I got close, she wasn't there." Another pause. The previous tenant mentioned disturbances, but I thought it was just the isolation getting to him. What history? In 1847, a woman named Elena Vasilescu lived there with her husband. She was a writer like you. She spent most of her time in the attic working on her novels, but her husband was troubled. He became convinced that she was having an affair, that she was using her writing as a cover for secret meetings with other men. When they finally found her body months later, the entire attic was covered in her writing. They painted over it, but I felt a chill run down my spine. What happened? He walled her up in the attic, alive. They say she kept writing until the very end, scratching words into the walls with her fingernails. But what? The writing keeps coming back, and Elena, she's still there, still writing, still waiting for someone to read her final story. My laptop, the novel I'd been working on for 3 years, was on that laptop, and I hadn't backed it up in weeks. I pulled over at a gas station, cursing myself for being so careless. I hung up the phone and immediately began packing, but as I carried my bags to the car, I found myself looking up at the attic window. My laptop, my notes, my entire life's work all gone. There was only one place left to look. The house was only an hour away, and I could be back on the road before dark, against every instinct screaming at me to keep driving. I turned the car around. My laptop sat open on the desk, its screen glowing in the dim light. I approached cautiously, afraid of what I might find. Was that a figure I saw there watching me? I blinked, and it was gone. Lines and lines of text filled the page, written in an elegant script that seemed to move and flow like living things. I leaned closer to read. My husband, in his jealous rage, has condemned me to this fate, but I will not be silenced. I will write until my fingers bleed, until my breath fails, until the very walls themselves bear witness to my tale. I drove halfway to Bucharest before I realized what I'd forgotten. The text continued to scroll, as if being written in real time. He is coming, my reader. He knows you are here. He thinks you are another lover, another reason for his rage. Run while you can, but know that you will return. They always return. The story must be told. The words seemed to glow with their own light, pulsing like a heartbeat. It would only take a few minutes to run back and get it. The walls were covered with her story, not just her death, but her entire life. Her dreams, her fears, her desperate love of words and stories. She had been a brilliant writer, ahead of her time, trapped in a world that didn't understand her. I grabbed the computer and ran for the stairs, but the door at the bottom was closed, because somewhere in the house below, her husband was still there, still jealous, still murderous, and he knew I was there. I yanked on the handle, but it wouldn't budge. The doorknob rattled, and I heard a man's voice, thick with rage. The house looked different when I returned. The shadows seemed deeper, the windows darker. He wore a black suit from another century, and his face was twisted with fury. But when he saw me, his expression changed to confusion. The door was locked or blocked or simply gone. I pounded on it with my fists, screaming for help, but the only response was the echo of my own voice in the narrow stairwell. I could only point to the words on the walls, to Elena's story written in her own blood and tears. I parked and hurried inside, heading straight for the library where I'd left my laptop. It wasn't there hours, days. Time seemed to stop in that cursed place. I tried everything, breaking down the door, climbing out the window, even using the laptop to call for help. Nothing worked. I searched the entire ground floor, growing more frantic by the minute. The door at the end of the hall was wide open now, and I could hear something from above. Not footsteps this time, but a softer sound. The scratching of fingernails on wood, the attic. I climbed the stairs with dread weighing down each step. I forced myself to climb the narrow staircase. The attic was exactly as I'd left it, except for one thing. The screen displayed a document I'd never seen before. My dearest reader, you have come at last. I have waited so long for someone to hear my story. I tried to close the laptop, but the screen wouldn't respond. You feel it now, don't you? The weight of the walls closing in, the air growing thin. I slammed the laptop shut, but the screen remained lit, the text still visible through the closed lid. No, 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 I whispered, pulling harder. Behind me, I heard the scratching sound again. I turned to see words appearing on the attic walls, carved into the wood by invisible fingernails. Help me tell my story. Don't leave me alone. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. Soon, every surface in the attic was covered with Elena's desperate pleas. I don't know how long I stayed trapped in that attic. Eventually, I stopped trying to escape. I sat at the desk where Elena had spent her final days, and I began to read. As I read, I began to understand. Elena wasn't keeping me trapped. She was protecting me. I heard him before I saw him. Heavy footsteps on the stairs below, climbing slowly but inevitably toward the attic. Elena, I know you're in there. I know you have another man with you. The door burst open, and he stood there tall, gaunt, with eyes like burning coals. Who are you? He demanded. Where is my wife? I couldn't speak. He read for a moment, his face growing paler. Then he looked at me again, and I saw something terrible in his eyes, the realization that his wife had been innocent, that his jealousy had murdered an innocent woman. No, he whispered, no, it can't be. She was unfaithful. She was only a writer, like me. What have I done? He whispered as he dissolved into shadow. What have I done? She was a writer. I found my voice at last. He stared at me for a long moment, and then his form began to fade. The door at the bottom stood open, and I stepped through into the hallway. The house felt different now, emptier, but also somehow at peace. I collected my things and left, driving through the night until I reached Bucharest. My laptop screen flickered and went dark. Elena's story was finally complete, her truth finally told. The attic fell silent. The words on the walls glowed brighter for a moment, then faded to nothing. Not the desperate scratching on the walls, but a beautiful, finished novel. Her life's work, preserved in digital form. I published it under her name, and it became an international bestseller. I walked down the stairs on shaking legs, and I know that somewhere in the mountains of Transylvania, Elena Vasilescu is still writing, still waiting for readers to discover her words. When I finally worked up the courage to open my laptop, I found Elena's story there. But sometimes late at night I still hear the scratching. The job posting was too good to be true. A medical research position at a private clinic in Sighișoara, with a salary that would let me pay off my student loans in 2 years. He was a tall, elegant man with silver hair and eyes so pale they were almost white. "Welcome to Sighișoara. I trust your journey was pleasant." His English was perfect, with only the faintest trace of a Romanian accent. The email was vague about the nature of the research, but after 6 months of unemployment, I wasn't in a position to be picky. Dr. Corneliu Durculidi met me at the train station. "Dr. Sarah Chen," he said, shaking my hand. "Long but fine," I replied, trying to hide my exhaustion. From the outside, it looked like a boutique hotel. Stone walls, iron fixtures, and carefully manicured gardens. Inside, it was state-of-the-art. Clean white hallways, modern equipment, and the subtle hum of air conditioning. The overnight train from Bucharest had been cramped and uncomfortable. "Excellent. Shall we go?" "The clinic is not far." The clinic was housed in a renovated medieval building on the outskirts of the old town. "You'll be analyzing samples, running tests, looking for patterns." The clinic had blood samples from patients all over Romania, many from remote mountain villages. I was looking for genetic markers associated with various blood disorders, anemia, hemophilia, clotting deficiencies. The cells showed signs of extreme longevity far beyond what should have been possible. The samples were meticulously catalogued with detailed family histories going back generations. Not just clotted, actually healed, restoring the original cellular structure within hours. "Your background in hematology makes you perfect for this work. Most of our staff works the night shift. We find it more conducive to concentration. I hope you don't mind adjusting your schedule. Every single sample contained a mutation I'd never seen before. It affected the production of hemoglobin, but not in a way that would cause a disorder. Instead, it seemed to enhance the blood's ability to carry oxygen and nutrients. They're from people with enhanced blood. What kind of research is this really?" "Impressive," I said as Dr. Durculidi led me through the corridors. "We spare no expense for our research," he replied. "Come, let me show you to your quarters." My apartment was on the 3rd floor, overlooking the medieval citadel. It was spacious and comfortable, with a full kitchen and a view that belonged on a postcard. I had expected a cramped dormitory room, not luxury accommodations. "What exactly will I be working on?" I asked as we stood on the balcony. After Dr. Durculidi left, I unpacked my things and settled in for my first night in Sighișoara. "Genetic disorders," Dr. Durculidi said. "Specifically, hereditary conditions that affect the blood," and the other researchers. "You'll meet them tomorrow." I didn't mind. Night shifts paid better, and I'd always been something of a night owl anyway. The work itself was fascinating. But something was off. The more I analyzed the samples, the more patterns I began to see. Patterns that didn't make sense. First, there was the age issue. The samples were supposedly from patients ranging from infants to elderly adults, but the cellular structure was remarkably consistent. Second, there was the genetic anomaly. Third, there was the regenerative capacity. When I damaged the samples for testing, they healed. I brought my concerns to Dr. Durculidi during one of our weekly meetings. "The samples you've given me," I said, "they're not from patients with blood disorders." He was quiet for a long moment, studying me with those pale eyes. "You're very observant, Dr. Chen, perhaps too observant." "I'm a scientist. Observation is my job." "Indeed. Tell me, what do you think you've discovered?" I hesitated. The conclusion I'd reached was impossible, but the evidence was undeniable. The samples show signs of extreme longevity. The cells are ancient but perfectly preserved, and the regenerative capacity. I paused. "It's almost like they're from people who can't die." Dr. Durculidi smiled, and for the first time I noticed how sharp his teeth were. "Precisely, Dr. Chen. You've identified the key characteristic of our research subjects. They are, as you say, people who cannot die. That's impossible, is it? You've seen the evidence yourself. We have lived in these mountains for over 600 years. We have watched empires rise and fall, seen plagues come and go, witnessed the birth of nations." And we have never aged, never died, never succumbed to the weaknesses that plague ordinary mortals. The cellular structure, the genetic markers, the regenerative properties. These are not ordinary humans, Dr. Chen. These are the blood samples of my family, not much a few ounces per month for each of us. But it must be fresh and it must be taken willingly. I stared at him. Your family? Every instinct in my body screamed at me to get up and leave that room. But I was a scientist, and this was the discovery of a lifetime. How? The Draculae bloodline. But as I sat in my apartment that night, looking out at the medieval towers of Sighișoara, I realized that Dr. Draculae was right. The genetic structure of the Draculae bloodline was unlike anything I'd ever seen. If I could identify the specific sequences that caused the vampiric transformation, I could potentially create a gene therapy to undo it. The mutation that granted them immortality was incredibly complex, affecting not just blood production but cellular regeneration, immune function, and metabolic processes. They had adapted to the modern world, learning new languages, following technological advances, participating in human society. But they were also prisoners, bound by their need for blood and their inability to form lasting relationships with mortals. How do you get people to give it willingly? People come to us for treatment and we help them. In return, they donate blood. They think it's for medical research, and in a way, it is centuries ago when we first became what we are. But we evolved, learned to take only what we needed and to give something back in return. We're not proud of what we were, but we're not ashamed of what we've become. We've developed treatments for dozens of diseases using our enhanced understanding of blood chemistry. It was as if their entire genome had been rewritten. This was the opportunity of a lifetime. But the blood of the willing, that is sweet, pure, life-giving. Dr. Draculae provided me with everything I needed: equipment, funding, and access to the other members of his family. I identified the specific genetic sequence that caused the vampiric transformation, a retrovirus that had integrated itself into the Draculae genome centuries ago. The virus had been dormant in the bloodline for generations, but something had activated it in the 1400s, transforming the entire family. I should have run. Your enhanced healing abilities will keep you alive during the transformation, but once the process is complete, you'll be fully human, mortal, vulnerable. Their son, Mihail, looked like a teenager but had the bearing of someone much older. But there was a catch: the process would be incredibly painful, and there was no guarantee of survival. There were cousins, aunts, uncles, an entire extended family trapped in their immortal forms. We can never have human friends, never be truly close to anyone except each other. It's a lonely existence, Dr. Chen. The blood, he said simply. We require the blood of others to sustain our immortality, willingly. The blood of the unwilling is bitter, corrupted by fear and anger. It provides no nourishment. I felt sick. You're talking about vampires, such a crude term. We prefer enhanced humans. But yes, if you must use that word, then yes, we are what your folklore calls vampires. Do you think we take pleasure in our dependence on others? We are prisoners of our own biology, slaves to an addiction we cannot break. For 6 centuries, my family has searched for a way to become human again. Your expertise in genetic therapy gives us hope, and you want me to help you. I want you to cure us. I blinked. What? Do you think we enjoy this existence, Dr. Chen? You want me to make you mortal? I want you to free us, to break the curse that binds us to this half-life, to let us die as God intended. I left that meeting in a daze. Everything I thought I knew about the world had been turned upside down. I threw myself into the work, but every genetic modification could theoretically be reversed. The work was exhausting. I spent 18 hours a day in the lab, analyzing samples, running simulations, testing theories. I met them gradually. His wife, Elena, was a beautiful woman who appeared to be in her 30s but spoke of events from the 15th century. They were not monsters. They were intelligent, cultured, even kind. We watch everyone we care about grow old and die, Elena told me during one of our conversations. But the blood, I said. We run a medical clinic, she said simply. So you're not killers? We were once. After 3 months of intensive research, I had a breakthrough. More importantly, I figured out how to deactivate it. The gene therapy was complex, requiring a series of injections over several weeks. It would gradually reverse the vampiric mutations, returning the patient to full humanity. The therapy will essentially kill and resurrect you, I explained to Dr. Draculae. And if something goes wrong? You could die, permanently this time. He was quiet for a long moment. When can we begin? You want to try it? Dr. Chen, I have lived for 600 years. I have seen empires rise and fall, watched the world change beyond recognition. I have loved and lost more times than I can count. I am tired. We are all tired. If there is a chance to end this curse, to finally rest, then we must take it. The first test subject was Mihail, the youngest of the family. He insisted on going first, claiming that if something went wrong, his death would be less of a loss than his parents'. The transformation was horrific to witness. For 3 days, Mihail writhed in agony as his body fought to reject the vampiric virus. His skin burned, his blood boiled, his very DNA rewrote itself. He could feel his heart beating, his lungs drawing breath, his body aging moment by moment. But Elena and Dr. Derculidi never left his side, holding his hands and speaking to him in Romanian. On the 4th day, the fever broke. Mihail opened his eyes, and for the first time and for centuries, they were truly human. Elena was next. Then Dr. Derculidi, then the extended family members. She wrote of their grief, but also of their joy. He had finally found the rest he had sought for so long. Each transformation was as brutal as the first, but each was ultimately successful. They lived normal, mortal lives, formed human relationships, and aged gracefully. In a world full of disease and death, I had destroyed the only cure for mortality. I had taken beings of incredible power and knowledge and made them ordinary. One by one, they passed away, each death a victory over the curse that had bound them for centuries. But in the basement, in a locked room that only I have the key to, my research notes remain, the cure for vampirism, waiting for the day it might be needed. Again, it worked, he whispered. I'm free. One by one, the rest of the family underwent the treatment. Within 6 months, the entire Derculidi bloodline was human again. They aged visibly, their immortal features softening into mortality. But they were happy, truly happy for the first time in centuries. For however long we have left, we'll live as humans should, we'll grow old, we'll die, and we'll be at peace. Thank you, Dr. Derculidi said on my last day at the clinic. He looked older now, with lines around his eyes and gray in his hair. You've given us the greatest gift imaginable, the gift of a natural death. What will you do now? I asked. My research notes were encrypted and stored in a dozen different locations. The cure for vampirism was too dangerous to lose, but also too dangerous to share carelessly. Live, he said simply. I left Sighișoara with a sense of accomplishment I'd never felt before. I had literally saved a family from eternal damnation. 6 months later, I received a letter from Elena. Dr. Derculidi had died peacefully in his sleep, the first natural death in the family for over 600 years. I kept in touch with the family over the years. Mihail became a teacher, Elena a nurse. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if I did the right thing. Then I remember Dr. Derculidi's words. We are prisoners of our own biology, slaves to an addiction we cannot break. And I know that I didn't destroy anything. I set them free. The clinic in Sighișoara still operates, run by the descendants of the Derculidi family. It's a normal medical facility now, treating ordinary human ailments. Because in a world where legends walk among us, someone needs to be ready to send them home.